Hey, everybody, and welcome to Your Spiritual Best Friend. I am your host, Josh Sanchez, and I'm here with a very special guest, Christopher Glatis. How are you doing, Christopher, and what's going on?
I'm doing great, man. It's Friday, so it's the beginning of the weekend. So it's always and it's sunny here where I'm at, so I'm all good. Couldn't ask for anything else.
I know if you want to disclose, like around your location, where are you based from?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh man, so it must be great over there in the West Coast. You got the nice sun, got the nice attitude, atmosphere around there.
Yeah, sometimes like where I'm at, like we have what's called June gloom. So a lot of times it's really like overcast till like noon, and then it burns off. But the temperature's always great. So minor problems. The weather overall is great here.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's definitely something. California is definitely something on my bucket list. I'm on the East Coast. I'm in like the Philadelphia area, so it's like the complete opposite coast and stuff. So that's definitely something. Traveling to California is something that's definitely on my bucket list and stuff. But
I
Chris,
grew up, I grew up in Maryland actually, so I wasn't far from you.
oh man, oh man. So what led to the move? If you wanted to disclose, from Maryland all the way to LA.
It probably was the entertainment business, and nowadays everything's so connected. You don't necessarily have to be in Los Angeles, but I think I came here for other reasons too. I think LA seems to, at least when I moved out here, it seemed to be more of a more open to this kind of discussion, right? Like where I grew up in the East Coast, it was more politics, and people weren't really talking about their what they struggle with or their vulnerabilities or any of that stuff. So I think that's also the weather. You got mountains, you got the ocean, so all those things wrapped into one.
I love it. I love it. So definitely, that's definitely again, like I mentioned, like California is definitely something that is on the bucket list. Definitely need to take a
Yeah.
flight out there and see. But Chris, I just want to say again, thank you for reaching out and wanting to come on the podcast. So with this podcast, I really think starting us off, we're going to talk a little bit about your journey. I know you mentioned in your last answer, part of the move to California, Los Angeles was, the openness to, disclose and be more vulnerable with people, especially when it comes to mental health and stuff. So I know you mentioned that you're a filmmaker. I know that you're also an author too. So which avenue would you really like to start first? Can we try, just like the filmmaker side, like what got you into filmmaking and how has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got the bug in undergraduate school. I probably was trying, I was in there as a business major, and it just wasn't clicking with me. And I also, I think going the theatrical communication route seemed to be a little easier at the time, and so I kind of, and I had some other buddies of mine who were in my fraternity who also were kind of going that route, and it was just fun. I mean, just creating, pulling, doing stuff. You could make all the mistakes you want because you weren't really putting it out anywhere. You had all the equipment, didn't cost you any money. And so I really started to think about when I was finishing undergraduate school, like, what do I want to do? And that was, go to film school was kind of the next step. Again, things have changed now, but that was really kind of where I wanted to take this urge, this bug that I had. And so I went to American University Graduate School. Um, their curriculum there was really to get an overall understanding of the filmmaking process. It wasn't like, I think USC and some of the schools out here, you get on a track, like a directing track or a writing track. And I kind of learned it all. And I took some classes up in New York, and I took some classes. I came out to LA and took some classes out here at UCLA Extension. And everyone that I trusted or I knew in the business was saying, if you can write in this business, you can do anything. And so I kind of followed that path.
Okay, Chris. So what I'm hearing from you is, you went through a mixture, of East Coast in the school, also West Coast in the school. And one of your biggest takeaways, and one of the main points that really stuck out to me in your last answer was you mentioned how in undergrad there was a shift for you, right? Where, you were going into this business track and then you realized and discovered, another passion, right? Which got you into like filmmaking and the communication industry. I know you mentioned another key takeaway about how like writing, like once you're able to write in this industry, you can go a long way. So when it comes to my next question, just building off of everything, when it comes to, the filmmaking process. So what are some films, that like what are some like genres or what type of films, do you really take pride in, and the storytelling that goes along with it?
Yeah, I tend to gravitate towards it doesn't have to be a thriller. I mean, now that a lot of the horror movies are really smart horror films, anything that has some sort of psychological bent to it. Go figure. From where I came from, my background dealing with not only anxiety myself, but also having in my family having mental illness. And so that was always a draw for me to understand why people do what they do. And that dark side, I don't know, is just intriguing to me. Like, what was that all about? Why do people, um, if people are struggling with some sort of internal demon, how do they rise from the ashes, right? And so those sort of stories have always drawn me in. And also, I think I'm attracted to filmmakers who really push the envelope, like films that really aren't mainstream films. I think that's why I love more independent films. Although, if you look at some of the greats, like Scorsese or Paul Thomas Anderson, or the list goes on. Um, they did things their way, and they weren't apologetic about what they were doing, and I think that because of them, because of filmmakers like that who push the envelope, it opens up the doors for other filmmakers, and so I really look up to, and also it's a big risk. Some of these guys, they're taking big swings, and it could either be amazing film or it could be a disaster. And so something about that risk also is exciting to me. So those are probably the filmmakers and the type of films I'm drawn to most.
Okay, okay. Yeah, the reason why I asked that question, just because I know like you've been in like the industry for a while now, right? So I just wanted to know like what are some things, like that really interest you and stuff. And that's really cool, the thriller and the psychological. Do you have like any top couple movies, that you would recommend when it comes to that genre? So that way, whether that's on like Netflix or, like other like the other media platforms, so that way people can give it a watch.
Man, it's so funny. I haven't seen any films in a long time, which is a little bit interesting from someone being in the business. Look, I think that one other thing I want to say is sometimes I don't love certain films, but I can really appreciate what they're trying to do as well. And I look at, like, I don't know, this film just popped into my head, but because I love this filmmaker and I love what he does, and he does everything that I just said, is David Fincher, who did the movie Seven. He did Fight Club, is the movie I was going to tell you. That's the movie I was going to bring up. Is that an older film, but just took big swings. The material that was based on, Chuck Palahniuk, I think is his name, who wrote the book. Also is a really, is a writer who kind of lives on the edge. So that would be one film. Look, I also love comedies. I also love to lighten it up as well. But yeah, that film comes to mind. I think I mentioned Seven, which is also a serial killer movie that kind of broke some molds the way it ended. But as we go along, if some other ones pop in my head, I'll bring them up. But yeah, I also brought up Paul Thomas Anderson, who I love his films. Boogie Nights. His films aren't necessarily thrillers, but they're very unique. All his films are very, very unique. Like Licorice Pizza was his last film.
Okay, Chris, definitely, and I'm going to give some of those definitely a watch as well. And like you said, as we continue our conversation, if you have any others, you can feel free to
Yeah,
just like free fall, whatever. Just let me know.
absolutely.
But yeah, Chris, so I just wanted to say, first again, like I appreciate your honesty, like what got you into this, because like you mentioned, it's all about the journey and the steps that we have taken, to get to where we are. So I know you mentioned a lot about like the anxiety, and I know you mentioned some like inner demons, right, that we all face. So my next question just for you is, what are some of those like anxiety moments for you, or when did you recognize the whole feeling of anxiety, and how has that really affected you in your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lifelong journey. I mean, I think that it really started right before college, undergraduate school, and I, I just think that I was, now I realize, growing up in the family that I grew up in, with the things that were going on. I know my parents loved me, but there was definitely neglect, and and I felt alone, and I felt like I had to kind of figure things out on my own, which was unbelievably frightening as a young kid. So I think when I went to college, I had some separation anxiety. Um, I finally went and saw a psychiatrist when I was in college, and I mean, that kind of shows you how desperate I was, because I wasn't really getting the support from my family at home. And I think that now, looking at this whole journey, that, and I try to state this in the book, is that the anxiety that I experienced, and how it kind of forced me to turn inward, really kind of allowed me to, I think it fed my art, for better or for worse, and also it allowed me to really understand myself on a very, very deep level, and in that, heal. And so when I look at, like, looking back and trying not to have regrets over things, it's looking trying to just reframe that as, I went through this, and I'm still going through this, but I'm a much more deeper three-dimensional person. I have a lot of compassion and empathy for others who struggle with, anxiety or mental illness as well. um so it's like a peeling layers of the onion off. There's something that, I mean, every day there's something new.
Yeah, Chris, and I will say first, I just want to acknowledge and say thank you, for being so honest, because I know, especially when it comes to reflecting on our past experiences and our anxieties, it can be very overwhelming at times, to go back to like that moment, where we were feeling and where we were feeling one of our lowest points of our life, right? And I think when it comes to mental health, like there has been a lot of barriers, when it comes to actually, disclosing and being vulnerable with others. So I really appreciate so far your honesty, and to share some of those anxieties of the separation anxiety, and also like the other fears that you've had in undergrad, and getting help and getting and finding a psychiatrist. Just to share as well, that's something, when I was an undergrad, that's when I really got into therapy as well. It really was an eye opener for me as well. So to hear you share that story, I just wanted to highlight that as well. But just building off of, everything that we've said. So when it comes to those barriers, right, or like that first step, to admitting like, hey, like I definitely have something that's going on. I need to get some help. For you, like when did you realize it was time to find that psychiatrist? And like what was the first steps that you took, to get yourself back right?
Yeah, well, the other thing I want to bring up, about what you just said, is that I think for men also, it's really a tough thing to admit to, um, some sort of struggle, right, like that, because I'm broken. I failed. And I think I'm making generalizations, but I think this is what goes through a lot of men's head. Like, I grew up with a very type A father, so it was always appear strong, and just suck it up. I remember one time it was like, go to the gym and, work it out in the gym or whatever. So I don't think, I think some of those things are good, but I think that to be able to, let men know that it's okay. Actually, vulnerability is strength. The ability to be vulnerable is a strong characteristic. Um, like I said, for me, I think I just reached a breaking point when I realized that I wasn't going to get any sort of support or help or direction from my parents. And being at college, I was keeping it from my roommates because, again, for the reasons I just mentioned, um, I just, I just thought like that's where I didn't really think about a therapist. I thought, I don't know why I thought of a psychiatrist, but, and I just, searched the local, tried to find one in the area, which I did. And what was amazing is when I went and saw him, it was like within 5 minutes, he's like, he labeled me, which I don't like labels, but he said, "Hey, you have panic disorder." And I was like, it was so relieving because no one had ever said like, this is what it is. It's treatable and you're okay. You're going to be fine. And he loaded me up on some medication, which at that time was fine. I have a different view on medication now, but he got me over the hump. He opened up a door for me, and on some level that changed my life that day.
Yeah, Chris, and I will say it seems to me, like that. Because like when it comes to like us finding treatment, right? Like different approaches are going to work for everybody. And it seems for you, like the fact that your psychiatrist was very, direct and honest right away, it relieved you to, like, okay, like now I actually know like what it is, right? And then once you're able to find that medication and get adjusted, you're starting to feel better. Am I getting that correctly? Am I missing anything or?
No, the only thing you'd be missing is that he had recommended, he at that time that I actually get into, he had like a group that he was involved with, like where other people were struggling and they could talk. And I just pushed, I wanted the quick fix back then, and I write about this in the book also, is that there is no quick fix. And I think that being in college, I was like, I want to enjoy college. I don't want to be in a group talking about this, and I'm just going to take the medication and I'll be fine. But what I realized is when came off that medication, all that stuff is still simmering underneath, stuff that I hadn't worked on. And so when I finally got out to California and started to see a therapist who didn't have the ability to write me a prescription and was mentioning that I should get into, some group work, I think that's where things really started to change, because I didn't have the medication to fall back on. I felt I was in a group of people who were struggling with similar things and they were supporting one another. And I was able to actually voice this stuff, not just to a therapist or psychiatrist, but other people, which is healing in and of itself.
Yeah, Chris, you made a really good point, of like joining the group work as well, like joining groups, of other people that have experienced certain things. For you, when it comes to, finding those groups, like if someone was just starting, trying to figure out and find like themselves, especially when it comes to discovering their own anxieties, like when it comes to like the concept of like the group therapy, what were some of the things that you took away from it with your experience of being in like the group therapy session and joining other support groups to really help you, work on that anxiety?
Yeah, I mean it's priceless. I mean, I got involved with some men's groups out here as well, because I think men, like I said before, they deal with things that are um, that women might not deal with, or they deal with it differently. And I think that just being in a group of men, supported by men, especially since I had a father that I know he loved me, but he wasn't, he was distant. And so being in a supportive, loving, environment with other men was just fantastic. And, I want to say some of these things are, there's no cost involved. I mean, I've done, uh, what is it? It's the adult children of alcoholics, which is part of the AA program, and that is free. It's online. I mean, you literally can. There's literally a meeting every couple of hours because they're happening worldwide, and I've actually started to jump into that recently because it's just another tool. It's just another support group. I think that doing the one-on-one thing is great, but once you get your sea legs, being in a group and actually seeing other people that are struggling with the same thing you are, it has like an interesting effect on your healing process. It can be really challenging too, but that's good too. You want to challenge yourself. Um, but nowadays there's all these things are online. There's therapy that's free. There's low cost therapy. I mean, what is out there now for people is just, it's amazing. I mean, there's so much support out there at various levels and costs.
Okay, Chris, and again, like I said, I really appreciate, just your honesty, sharing all of your experiences, right? Between joining support groups and also, finding a therapist, finding a psychiatrist. And I really appreciate everything so far. Now, I know you mentioned your book a couple times, so when your mind screams, and I love the cover, and I've read a little bit of your book, and I really like what you're saying. Like you said, like the vulnerable storytelling is so important. So when it comes to creating your book, like what were some challenges for you? And now, you've reached a point where, like it's on Amazon, and a lot of people have read it now. Like, how has that been for you, being, like creating like your own story about you, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, right? I've been writing for a long time, screenplays, mostly screenplays, but writing in general is hard. I mean, I think people have this idea that once you do it, like it gets easier, but it really doesn't. And then when I jumping into a nonfiction book, which I'd never done before, um, was very challenging because my book is kind of like it's got a bunch of tools, but it also is like almost like a memoir. I talk a lot about my life, and I think that the reason why I wanted to do it's like a hybrid. The reason why I wanted to do that is because to show people what I've been through. I'm sure people who have read it will have been through more than I have, less, but it gives me a little bit of credibility into what I'm talking about. It's not a clinical book, and there's plenty of books out there that'll tell you what's going on in your brain and all that. And that's important. But if you want to heal, it's you got to switch into a different mode, and you have to do the work. It's not easy. Um, and it's outlined in the book. I think that the having a team of people to kind of help me do this. I had a developmental editor, copy editor, all these different people. I had people read it, give me their feedback. So it was a long journey. It was trying to balance out the stories with the tools, and also trying to do something a little bit different than what's out there. I mean, I think there's a few books out there that are kind of go down a similar path, but um, I'm a true believer that, at least now, that things don't have to be so complicated. I think that when I was younger, it was like I made things so complicated. Like you had to do this and this and this and this, and you had to listen to this, and it just becomes so overwhelming. It creates anxiety, right? So I tried to narrow down the handful of tools that I've used over the years that have worked for me, and that are they're simple, but you have to do them. Simple but not easy, I think is what they say. Um, but it's been a really wonderful journey, and now I'm just trying to get the book in front of people who I think really would benefit from it.
Yeah, and just like you said, like it really is a whole journey, right? And one of the main takeaways that really stuck out to me in your last answer was, you mentioned how when you were younger, like you would overthink, right? And it would be like you would over when it comes to like the project, right? Like you would overemphasize certain things, right? And it would just create so much like added pressure and add to, that anxiety. Whereas like now, like I've noticed, like you've said like, hey, like if I'm gonna take my time with this, right? I'm gonna make sure I'm getting all this stuff done. And like it's not as like that intensity factor, right? It's not as like intense as it once was, right? Because when it comes like that pressure and stuff, which is good to see, right? Because as you become more of a writer, right? Like you're getting more experience, and you are getting more, comfort, and you're getting comfortable, the more you are doing it. Is there anything that I missed, or like or those some like just those like takeaways and stuff?
Yeah, no, you hit every point. I think the one other thing I wanted to say, and I do cover this in the book a little bit, is that what I started to realize with I don't know if you've reached this point yet, but with therapy is great, but I also think it sometimes can be used as a crutch, and you have to know when you're just showing up for therapy just to lean on someone, or I believe like therapists, personal trainers, they should lose clients all the time, right? Because they're doing their job. If you're with someone for too long, or even just changing up therapists just to get a different perspective, what I realized is that it was very clear to me that like this neck up stuff that I was doing was not working for me anymore. Just going in and talking and talking and talking. And so I shifted into another modality, which is called trauma therapy, which is more. So this is called top down, and then they have bottom up, which is more of like how the body is speaking to you. And there's some wonderful books out there. The Body Keeps the Score, which is probably the main one, which is, with anxiety for me, I've been trying to keep a lid on my emotions. And what happens is as emotions come up, I feel this thing in my chest. I start to get in my head and it just spins out of control. So, how can I sit with these really uncomfortable feelings in my body and let them just feel them fully? And it sounds a little woo woo. And I was really skeptical at first. And it's been a long journey, but some of that work I think is the most potent and powerful. Um, and it's hard because you're sitting with things that you couldn't sit with when you were younger, right? So you just push them off, you disassociated, whatever. And now you're giving them the freedom to you're giving, and it feel like you're dying sometimes. I mean, it feels horrible. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there because I think that that's at least that's where my journey went.
Yeah, no, Chris, I was gonna say, like, I really like your point about like the trauma-based therapy too, and like, and it's all helping, just building like your awareness when it comes to like yourself, like connecting within, being more mindful, of how trauma and how it manifests in your physical bodies. And I completely agree. That book, The Body Keeps the Score, I've read it. It's been one of my most influential books for me that's really helped me get into the psychological field, and also like work as a counselor. So I will say like the fact that you're recommending that book is a really good sign too, because the trauma that we experience, it's fascinating how it still affects our physical bodies. Like there's specific parts in our body that are affected physically due to the trauma we face, whether that is, because I know for me it was a lot of like back stuff for me when I was younger. And it just how like when you suppress it, it just builds and builds and builds. So again, I really just appreciate, Chris, like just your honesty and your overall takeaways from your own experiences and your journey to where you are now. So definitely keep up the great work. You got some good stuff going.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Of course. But I just want to transition a little bit. I know we talked a lot about your experiences and your journey so far. Relationships, are a very big point of our life, and I know you mentioned you've made some like group relationships, right? That's really helped you. Also, like your editing team, right, has really helped you when it comes to publishing, helping you publish your book and stuff. So when it comes to overall relationships, what are some qualities, that you've had to learn and look for, that you need from like other people?
Yeah, I think that for me, I think I had to develop a trust before, like, I had trust issues, big trust issues because of how I grew up. So, meeting someone, establishing, getting into a relationship, whether it's, an intimate relationship or whether it's or a business relationship, it was a struggle for me because I didn't trust that person until, it took a while to get that to develop that trust, right? I think, like I said before, the men's group was great for me because I think that that's where I really struggled the most because of my relationship with my father. And so to see, to be with really loving um men who were very clean, and clean in meaning they weren't trying to get something. They weren't trying. They were just there, holding a space for me or supporting me, or they might have been a little farther along than me, so they were, almost like a mentor. Um, the men's groups were really helpful in creating trust that I didn't have, and then the ability that would seep out into other areas of my life and other relationships. I think also, I'm generalizing again, but I think that creatives, specifically writers, tend to be more introverted. And, I know that I love sitting in this office behind this desk and just grinding stuff out. I'd rather do that than be at a rave, with thousands of people, So, um, so I think that there's a personality, that goes along with certain types of creatives, and that, I have to push myself. Like even doing podcasts, like I love chatting with people about this. But when I first started, I was like, oh man, what am I going to say? I don't know. You know, we're live, like, um, so it's really, creating a place where the trust was there. And then just, another great book is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which is, I think her name is Stephanie Jeffries, maybe. Um, but that's also like knowing that I'm not always going to feel like perfectly comfortable, and just do it, and just do it. Whether that's, going up to a woman that you find attractive, or, reaching out to someone that for me, it might be a producer, or, to pitch something, so it's developing that skill, and kind of doing it over and over again, that allows you to build those relationships that you want. And even today, I mean, I'm still like, like me and my wife were like, we want a bigger community, and how do we do that? And, we don't have kids, so we don't get invited to a lot of the kids things, when they have. So we're trying to develop more of a community and relationships, because I think that I'm happy you brought that up, because that is one of the things I think that is lacking a little bit in my life, and it's so important. You have to have community, you have to have social interaction, or else it's going to create more anxiety, depression, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and just to add to your point, Chris, like having like that social side, right? Realizing, like what is it that I need in my own community, right? And our own form of community is going to look different for everybody. And like you said, like without it, like that we can lose parts of ourselves. And I just first want to acknowledge though, because that was a first great point. And another great point that, stood out to me in your last answer was, building and finding that trust, to reach out, and for me, that's something that I can share as well. Like when it comes to reaching out for people for podcast, or, trying to reach out to producers, right? Like, hey, like I have this idea, pitch like this idea, like there's a lot of vulnerability that's involved there, and having that trust within, right? So like, regardless of, what the other person is going to say, right, can really help us, right? Because like you mentioned, like we're not always going to feel 100% like, oh, like I'm ready to do this now. I feel 100% confident. Like there's going to be certain days, where we're not going to be as confident, right? But like you said, we just got to continue to push through. Like we can still do this, and reminding ourselves that is so important. So having that trust within for yourself, to be able to assert yourself, right? Not so much, being aggressive, but like stating and communicating what you need, how you feel, right? And what ideas you have, right? So that way you feel heard, and you're also getting your point across. It's so important. So I just wanted to highlight that point and add a little bit more to what you're saying. Assertive communication. I learned that in some of my therapy sessions, being able to create statements for myself, right? To be able to like describe how I'm feeling, but also not, like make it all about me, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, like, we just went through three of the darkest years where people were sequestered. I mean, some people were, they were sequestered. So the community aspect got just, blown up for a while. And I think you're seeing some of that now. You're seeing some of that, the ramifications of that. I think there's going to be, I've said, I think there's going to be some PTSD reaction to that, being, I mean, I lost a couple people, acquaintances that ended their life because, and I was like, these were like the last people I thought that was going to happen to. And I think COVID and being sequestered and not being around people had something to do with that. It created this like pressure cooker that if people hadn't done any work on themselves, like they're all of a sudden they're with themselves, or maybe they're with one other person, and it's like they just got to be there and sit with their stuff. And so I think that was a really ugly experiment that just happened, and we're going to see the ramifications for a while.
Yeah, and just add to your point, because what I currently do now for my full-time job, I run groups for a lot of like the adolescent, and I just talked to my boss like today, and we talked about how like my boss mentioned to me how our numbers have never been higher at this time of the year, because usually, right, like schools coming to an end, right, the numbers are smaller, But like you said, due to like the pandemic, and we're starting to see more of those ramifications of, being isolated and not having that community aspect for multiple years. And I know now, where things are opening up now, more, and we're able to like do the things that we wanted to do before the pandemic. But like you mentioned, like those ramifications of those couple years, like some people have missed a lot of graduations and all those little things that we would do, right? Going out with friends, like that was taken away for such a long period of time. So just to add to your point, Chris, like I'm seeing it in the field I'm doing now, like the numbers have never been higher
Yeah.
due to how the pandemic has really impacted everybody. So really great point. I just wanted to add to what you were saying. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, Chris, I just want to say again, I really appreciate everything you've shared so far, from your openness to your relationships to also, describing like your own journey through creating your book, and also, realizing that you've had anxiety, getting the help that you need, and being so open for it. I really appreciate everything so far. To end our conversation, I wanted to get into some astrology talk. So I know we talked a little bit before we recorded this podcast. You mentioned how you got your chart done before. So when it comes to your overall feel of astrology, how do you feel about it? And I know you've gotten your chart read once. Have you gotten it done multiple times before? What's your overall relationship with it?
Yeah, I've had it done a couple times. Like I think my wife kind of brought that to me. I mean, look, I'm into all the new age stuff, but the chart I sent you was a from a gentleman that I think I had it read a couple times. He was a little hard to like grasp like what he was saying. I mean, he went off on so many different tangents. And I've also done I've done Vedic astrology, which I'm sure it's a little bit like different. I think it's either like I'm a Libra, but I think it like in Vedic I might be a Virgo, or I'm not sure, but I know I haven't done a reading in a long, long time, but I like it as a tool, as just another tool. I don't take everything, 100%. Like I don't like this is the way things are going to be. And so, but yeah, I'm always interested to see how the idea that you're born on a certain day at a certain time and how that affects your life. And that just makes sense, like I do know that I was born in a really tumultuous time. And so how does that impact my life? Does it open me up to anxiety? I don't know. So I'm interested to see what your take is on it.
Oh yeah, of course. And like pretty much like what I do for like in just like this podcast stuff is like I highlight just like certain parts that I see in your chart, and I'll ask you some questions, because we talked a lot about your journey. So I'm starting to see some of the things in your chart, that gets highlighted.
Right, right, right.
And one of the biggest things I see right away, and once I'm done explaining, I'll let you know like how do you feel about it. Saturn. So Saturn, just
Yep.
in a quick summary, is the planet of you have to work hard here to get what you want. And we all have a Saturn in our chart. It's like the grandpa of the planets. But the thing is, right, like if you work hard, Saturn will reward you of your hard work. And one of the things for you that really stood out was your Saturn and your North Node. So North Node is things you're supposed to learn in this lifetime that in past lifetimes you did not learn. Because we all have like past lifetimes and we have current ones now and we have future ones. So those two are in the same area and the same energy, which is Aries, which involves everything when it comes to self-confidence. And it's in your eighth house. So the eighth house involves trauma. It involves like trauma. It involves intimacy. It involves transformation, implication, sexuality. So like this is the house, that's like it really heightens the sense of self, right? Like being able to be intimate, right? And transform into like your newest self, right? So one of the things I noticed right away hearing you like describe your journey and stuff was that Saturn in that eighth house, Aries is the self-confidence, right? That when Aries are good, right? It's I'm self-confident, I'm self-starting, like I'm going to do this. So when it comes to, that transformation for you, once you found that self-confidence within, Was that something, that you had to realize? Is that something you've really had to work and put in a lot of work in through your journey and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean, everything you're saying. Well, I think what that's funny you brought up Saturn. I did hear that it was direct for a while. Like that's the hardest time. And then now it's not direct. And I don't know, it happens like every, I don't know how many years. But I think that I've definitely struggled with self-worth issues. And so that makes a lot of sense that, trying to develop, I mean, I'm definitely confident, more confident in some areas, as anyone would be more confident in some areas than others. But it still lingers back there, like, trying to like pump myself up and being able to, um, and just know that, because I'm also a perfectionist. I mean, I don't think any level of what am I trying to say? I don't think that even if I had all the things I wanted or accomplished all the things I wanted, I think I would still be pushing, you know, and hopefully that'll lessen as I do more work on myself, because this, it's an inside job. It's not an outside job. It's not about all the things those things are great. They're wonderful, but it's really an inside job. And to really feel confident with just who you are as a person.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and that's the thing with Saturn, right? Like the more work you're gonna put in, the more you're gonna be rewarded. So that's the thing too. So that's something to think about too. Like as like I described a little bit of that, is just think about like how much you have grown from that, right? Because like you mentioned, like Saturn returns, it happens every 28 years. So that's when Saturn goes back to, like the sign it was when you were born. So what you're doing is you're reliving the things that you needed to work on, right? So just hearing your story and hearing your journey through that, like that was just something that really stuck out to me. Another thing I've noticed in your chart is I know you've mentioned like you've tapped into more like of inner work, right? Like stuff that's beyond, so your five senses and beyond. Jupiter. So as Saturn is the planet, the grandpa planet, right? So you have to work hard to get what you want. Jupiter is like the frat bro planet. So like this planet gives you like the abundance of confidence in this area. And for you, like your Jupiter is in Leo, which is all about, identity and a strong sense of ego. And it's in the 12th house, which involves the spiritual side of things, right? So like mental health, things that expand the five senses. Because I know you mentioned in your book and how like therapy and how mental health has really helped you. That's something too that stuck out to me right away too. As I was like, oh, you have the Jupiter in the 12th house, and a lot of 12th house placements, depending on what sign it is, can either shine light or also, dim the light. And to have Leo there is a really, really good placement for you. So I just wanted to know, like, has that been something too when it comes to like tapping into like that mental health, spiritual work? Like, has that really helped you find yourself more?
Yeah, but it's a double-edged sword. I think that like there's always searching. Like there's gonna like I can go off on a tangent and just do too much of that work, and so in my wife's the same way. So we're just like constantly grinding in this area, and it's like what is this all for? Like we want to just live at some point, right? So it's important, and but also I think there's I think I brought this up before, is that you don't want it to be a crutch. So you don't want it to say, I'm going to just keep doing this to avoid actually living your life. So when you said that be careful because it could also dim, but I think for the most part it got me to where I'm at now, and I think it's been good. But I think now I'm looking at I mean, we're not gonna be here forever, and I want to enjoy my life, and I want to, maybe take more risks and put myself out there and feel the fear and do it anyway, as I said before.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you actually highlighted and described Jupiter really well. Like Jupiter. The thing is, like when this energy so much, of like go go go, we have to be aware of like when is it too much. So that, and like when you highlighted that in your last answer, I was like, wow, you just described the planet Jupiter perfectly. So man, who knows? Maybe you got some astrology into you. That would be cool.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, so one of the last things I just wanted to talk about, just because like when I see a chart, there's so many things to talk about, and I don't want to. It'll be like two. We could do a whole separate podcast on just that. I know you mentioned that you are a Libra, and one of the things that I see in your chart right away is you have a Libra Sun and a Libra Moon.
Yeah.
So the Sun involves all of like the ego, right, and the Moon involves all of the emotions in the inner world. So when it comes to like that sense of ego and also emotions, to have the same sign and also in the same house, can be really good. It can be a strength, but it can also, like you mentioned, like the sword aspect, right? Like there can also be a clash there because it's too much similar energy. I noticed though that you had it in your second house. So the second house involves the material possession. So whether that's money, whether that's finances, whether that is just anything material possession wise. And Libra is all about that balance scale. So having the nice balance between everything, work, relationship. So when it comes to like yourself, right? When it comes to like your emotions and also like that ego, has materialism or like the sense of like possessions have really drove you throughout your life? Or is that something, that we didn't, I don't, just to think about?
Yeah, no, no. I think it has, in a sense that, like what I was speaking about before, is that if you feel empty inside, which I have, you try to fill it with things, right? You try to build your self-worth on possessions, fame, fortunes. And that's been, I've got to be careful with that, because I think that initially, at least, the entertainment business, that's something that I thought, that would get me that. I mean, a lot of people get into this business because they want to be validated, because they were never validated when they were younger. Again, generalization, but I think that a lot of artists, they just want that validation, and they want that attaboy. So yeah, I can see how that could play into my life. And also, um, I'm a doer, so it's just do, 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 and I've got to slow that down and really, um, you know, pay attention to other things, like, my relationship with my wife and my animals and nature, um and I do have an amazing life. I do have a lot of possessions. So that's, like, again, those things are great, but you have to have the internal alignment, to be able to appreciate those and know that, you know I mean, if you're trying to fill a hole, you'll never fill the hole. You got to clean that out, and heal yourself, so the hole's not there. But anyway, hopefully that answered your question.
Oh yeah, definitely it does, and that's one of the things about your chart, like, and that's one of the things I just wanted to highlight when it comes to astrology. It's like another tool in the toolbox, right? To just help you, discover some new things you might not have thought of.
Yeah.
So and I just want to say, Chris, like I really appreciate just your honesty from you sharing your chart, to sharing your experiences. I've really just appreciated your honesty, because I know how some of these subjects it can be, hard to talk about. But Chris, I just wanted to, before we wrap everything up, I wanted to, give you the chance, to advertise your book, and also where can everybody check you out and follow, whether that's on social media or any groups and stuff. So I'll give you the next couple minutes for you to, advertise yourself. So
Yeah,
floor is
thank you.
yours.
Thank you. I mean, the easiest place to go is probably my website, which is just my name, christopherglatis.com. And all the links to everything will be there: social media, my film projects. So that's really the main place to go. Obviously, you can go to Amazon. The book is there. If you just, when your mind screams, into the Amazon search bar, you'll find it. And then just keep a lookout. I'll be posting any sort of podcasts that come up. I'm just going to be posting them on the different social media platforms. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, Chris, and I'll make sure again I'll put your book and any links that you want in the show description as well, so that way whether you guys are tuning in live or listening to the podcast after on Spotify and Apple Podcast. I'll put it in the show description so that way you guys can follow Chris and all that fun stuff. But Chris, I want to say it's been an honor. Thank you for your honesty, and please stay safe.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. You're doing a great. I mean, this is what you're really providing a service out there for people. So keep on doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Same for you as well. Stay safe in LA.
Yeah, man. Thank you.